Okay, Wally, whenever you're ready.
Okay, good morning, good Erev Shabbos, everybody. Being Erev Shabbos, I wanted to focus on some basics concerning Kiddush. Primarily Kiddush on Shabbos morning. We talked in the past about whether you can make Kiddush on whiskey or wine. But here I want to talk about the location of Kiddush, when you make Kiddush, where you make Kiddush, and so forth.
Wally, your audio is not so good.
Not good. Why is that? Can you hear me at all?
There's a lot of like
Static.
fluttering noise.
Turn off the audio. Does that help?
The audio is very.
You try. What we did last time was if you take off your picture, sometimes the audio works. You can try that, but that means we can't see you. But you can try it.
This is very strange. Sure. Is this better? Can you hear me better now?
Yes.
All right, so you do it without my picture, that's all. Okay, so one of the Aseres Adibros, Zacharis Yom HaShabbos Lekadsho. So we remember Shabbos by making Kiddush. And Kiddush refers to Kiddush Friday night. Kiddush also Shabbos morning. By inversion, they call the Shabbos morning Kiddush Kedusha Rabbah. It's the greater Kiddush, even though it's the minor Kiddush. But the whole question is how you make Kiddush, where you make Kiddush, and over what do you make Kiddush is an important discussion in the Gemara. The basic halacha is that the Kiddush and the meal have to take place in the same place because one enhances the other. Kiddush allows you to sanctify Shabbos with a meal, and the meal is the sanctification part of Shabbos, so they have to be connected. And it's based on a halacha in the Gemara. We read the Gemara too. It's Gemara in Pesachim, in the name of Shmuel. And Shmuel raises a question ancillary to our discussion. He talks about the custom they used to make Kiddush in Shul. Why did they make Kiddush in Shul? And by the way, what we do today in Shul, we'll get to it later, it doesn't make any sense. But anyway, they used to make Kiddush in Shul. Why? So Shmuel, Lama li l'kedusha b'vei kinishta. Why do we make Kiddush in Shul? He asks. Sachem Kuf Aleph Amud Aleph. And he answers, La'afuke orchim yedei chavasam, to be motzi the visitors, the people that will be staying in the Shul, the ochlu v'shasu v'ganu b'vei kinishta. People who would be traveling through town had no place to stay. They would stay in the shul and they would eat in the shul, not in the base knesset itself, but in the anteroom to the shul. The Azda Shmuel v'tamei, and Shmuel is following his reasoning that he mentioned elsewhere. The Omar Shmuel ein kiddush ela b'makam seuda. That kiddush must take place where you eat your meal. That's a very important definition. Where you eat your meal, not necessarily snacks, as we'll see, but where you eat your meal. So people eat in shul, you make Kiddush in shul. Now, where did they make Kiddush in shul? Did they make it from the bima? In all probability, not. They made Kiddush in the room where people ate their meal. Because it doesn't make sense to make Kiddush in the bima, then you can't eat in shul. So they made Kiddush in the anteroom. Okay? So this halacha of Kiddush b'makam suda is the opinion of Shmuel, and the two are related. Kiddush and suda have to take place together in the same place. So most of us, you come home from shul Friday night, you make Kiddush, you eat your meal. That's the way it's supposed to be on Friday night, and that's the way it's supposed to be on Shabbos morning as well. The karasa la Shabbos oneg, the Navi says. So the kriya is the Kiddush, the oneg is the Seuda, and it makes sense. The Rosh reverses it a little bit. He says, where the place where you have oneg, that's where you have the kriya. Is where you eat your meal. It's a question of the cart before the horse before the car. Where you make kiddush, that's where you have to have the suda, or where you have the suda, you have to make kiddush. The bottom line is they both have to come together. Okay, so it's not just a semantic difference. It's a question of whether you fulfill the obligation of kiddush without a suda or not. You obviously cannot fulfill kiddush without a suda, and you can only make kiddush if there's a suda there. So it's two ends of the same spectrum. Now, what constitutes a suda? And this is important primarily for Shabbos morning. Friday night, I would say almost 100% of everybody has no problem fulfilling the mitzvah the way it's supposed to be done. Everybody comes home from shul, everybody makes kiddush, everybody makes hamotzi, and you've had your suda, so you have your kiddush, your oneg, all together. Friday night is not a problem. Shabbos morning, however, theoretically could be a problem because it's customary for people to make kiddush on Friday morning before they go home. In shul, someone else's house. Is that appropriate? Or if it is appropriate, how much do you have to eat in order to qualify as a suda? And are there differences in what you eat in order to justify you making kiddush? You can't make kiddush unless you have something to eat. How much you have to eat, what you have to eat is a machlokas among Rishonim and Achronim. The Balaturim quotes the Gaonim, and that says that if you drink wine, because wine is a mashke choshev, it's a prominent and important beverage. If you drink wine, then that qualifies as a seuda in terms of kiddush b'mokum seuda. The chashivos, the importance of wine, allows you to make kiddush without sitting down for a full meal. That's according to Balaturim. Others, the Drisha, other Rishonim and Achronim say you have to have mazonos, one of the five mini dagon, and you can't be yotzei kiddush just by having a schnapps. You have to have at least, preferably gafen, but most definitely you must have some mazonos to minimally qualify the kiddush. You can't just make kiddush without eating something of substance, and that has to be something of which make a bracha of borim rei mazonos. Strict interpretation is the Vilna Gaon, and there are people who follow the Gaon today. The Vilna Gaon, no uncertain terms, is very machmir and says that you have to have a Shabbos meal with appetite, with gusto, and that's why you have to have kiddush with a seuda. So he holds and you'll see people who are very, very makpid, that if they make kiddush in shul, they will wash over a roll and bench as well. Some people do that because you can't make kiddush unless you're having a seuda. And a glass of wine and a couple of cookies, even a piece of kugel, may not fulfill that requirement. So Vilna Gaon and those who follow the Gra are very, very makpid. If they're making kiddush in shul, they will wash as well, and they'll have a meal, and they'll fulfill the dictum of Rav Yehuda the Gemara that says not just 3 meals a day on Shabbos, but 4 meals. That'll be their 4th meal. Okay, and the discussion with the poskim concerns how many cookies you have to eat and so forth and so on. Whether it's considered a seuda without washing. The Gaonim are the opinion that it has to be a Mokum Seuda, and the Vilna Gaon follows this. Again, one hand washes the other. The Seuda enhances the Kiddush justifies the Seuda, and that's how you have to do it in order to justify making Kiddush in Shul on Shabbos morning or going to a friend's house before you go home. Rav Moshe is lenient in the Moshe Feinstein that you can recite Kiddush even if you're not having a Seuda, and it's not considered necessarily a bracha of Atola. But again, this is not a simple question, and it's everybody agrees though that if you do make Kiddush before you go home and have your lunch, you would have to make Kiddush again when you go home. The Kiddush you had in Shul does not suffice for that purpose. So you'd have to go home again and make Kiddush. Kiddush on Friday night is a whole separate issue. When you had people in the shul, guests, travelers, who were eating in the shul, then it was appropriate to make Kiddush, and that's where the minhag began. And the minhag began, but again, I wasn't around in the Middle Ages, but I'm quite certain they didn't make Kiddush from the bima, because you're not allowed to eat or drink in the shul itself. They made Kiddush where the orchim were, where the guests were eating their meal. Because right after they made Kiddush, they washed and they had the Suda. What we do today in shul is very, very problematic. Very problematic. Because if you're having a bar mitzvah or a sheva brachas in shul, whatever it is, then they're going to eat in the ballroom. They're going to eat in a different area, and they're going to make their Kiddush. So it makes no sense to make Kiddush in shul unless people are going to wash right after that Kiddush that they heard in shul, which they don't do. And many shuls have stopped this custom of making Kiddush in shul Friday night because of this halachic problem. In any event, the recommendation of Rov Poskim, for those that continue that minhag of making Kiddush in shul, give it to a child to drink. Because you really can't make Kiddush at this point. And you're doing it mishum minhag, but it's a very problematic minhag. And there are shuls that have stopped doing it simply because it doesn't make sense. Now, the justification might be, there might be somebody in shul who doesn't know how to make Kiddush himself, and therefore he'll be yotzei with that Kiddush. That's a possibility. The similar thing that exists, by the way, for Havdalah. We make Havdalah in shul, which is not really necessary either, because you've already said Havdalah in Maruv on Saturday night. So making Havdalah in shul is for those who may not make Havdalah at home. That makes sense. But most people in shul on Friday night are going to go home and make Kiddush again. It doesn't make sense to make Kiddush in shul. It's a minhag that has lost its, what's what I'm looking for? Has lost its function. It makes no sense anymore to make Kiddush in shul Friday night. Because as I said, if there is a simcha in shul, and if people are having a meal, they're going to make Kiddush at their table before they eat. Nobody is going to say amen to Kiddush and then go wash right away. So it's a very problematic minhag. And if you do it, Shulchan Aruch tells you very clearly, because it was already in his time already a problem, give the wine to a child to at least listen to bracha levatola in that regard. Now, Kiddush always has to come before the Seudah, as we mentioned, because you're not allowed to eat before you hear Kiddush. Okay, let's see. There's a whole discussion, a fascinating discussion about people who are eating a meal late Friday afternoon. Now, technically, you're not supposed to eat late Friday afternoon, so you enter Shabbos with a good appetite and you eat your meal with gusto. But if you were eating late Friday afternoon and then you realized, it's Shabbos already, and you stop eating, what do you do first? Do you bench first? Do you make Kiddush first? It's a fascinating halachic discussion. But you have to, eating is an important part of the Seudah. Normally, according to the Rush, you would stop eating, you'd make Kiddush, and then you'd eat some more. So you wouldn't bench at that point until after you've made Kiddush. According to the Ran, you just make Kiddush, you don't have to continue eating. But we paskin like the Rush. In any event, let's see what else there is here. But there's also an interesting discussion as to whether or not how much you have to eat after you're hearing Kiddush. Now, this would apply not just on Friday night and Shabbos or on Shabbos afternoon, but it would even apply in the Kiddush you make in shul. Do you have to eat enough food to make you not hungry anymore? because that would be a definition of a Seuda. If we're saying that a couple of cookies and a piece of kugel will satisfy the requirement to allow you to make Kiddush, how much food do you have to? Do you have to have Kedei Svia? Do you have to be satiated from your Kiddush so much so that you can't eat lunch when you go home? Now, there are some people who pack it in at a Kiddush, but that's an interesting question among the poskim. In all probability, Rove, again, with the exception of the Vilna Gaon, and there are people today who are very strict, like the Vilna Gaon, who will wash when they make Kiddush in shul. Most people will allow you to make Kiddush in shul or at someone's house and so forth, as long as you accompany it with either wine or mizonos. If you're just having a schnapps and you're having a piece of herring without a cracker, have the cracker, because without that, it would be difficult to justify making the Kiddush. So Kiddush b'makam Seuda is a halacha psuka. You can't get around that. You have to have Kiddush with a meal. What's considered a meal? Minimally wine and mizonos. Whether you should make Kiddush in shul before you go home and eat is an open question. But even if
Greene,
yes,
you mentioned having the cracker. If the cracker was not good enough, you need a mizonos, you need a revius, you need a kazayas rather. You need
Yes.
a complete kazayas to justify making the Kiddush.
I meant more than one cracker. I meant if you're having just herring, have a couple pieces of herring and a couple of crackers. You have to have enough to make an alamichya. You have to have again, according to most deos, when you make Kiddush on Shabbos morning in shul, it should be Kedei Svia. You have to be, not hungry anymore. Maybe by the time you go home, you'll get your appetite back. But the purpose of the Kiddush, is the Makam Suda, is to satisfy you. So if you satisfy, most people who don't eat before davening, so they look forward to Kiddush to have something to eat before they go home. But it's not just a tasting Kiddush. It's a Kiddush where you actually eat food to satisfy your hunger. Otherwise, Kiddush could be very, very problematic. There are many places, and especially in the yeshivas, where they don't have a Kiddush after davening. You finish davening, you go to lunch. Now, they may make Kiddush at 10:30 in the morning and have lunch at 11 o'clock, but they're fulfilling the halacha. And again, the Vilna Gaon followers still do that today. I have many acquaintances who do that. If they go to a Kiddush, they'll take a roll and they'll wash over the roll. So they'll have 4 sudas that day. But this is the halacha. The halacha is, number 1, Kiddush b'makam seuda, number 1. Number 2, Kiddush in shul Friday night, where at one time may have been practical, no longer has any purpose. And many shuls have done away with it. And number 3, if you're making Kiddush in shul on Shabbos morning, make sure you have wine or at least a sufficient mizonos to take away your hunger pangs so you can make it to get home for lunch. But this is an important halacha according to Shmuel, the Kiddush b'makam seuda, and that is the halacha psuka that we have to follow. Any questions or comments?
Wally,
Yes.
could you just talk about a little bit about the necessity to make your own individual bracha when you hear Kiddush or the Hamotzi?
No, it isn't necessary. If somebody has you in mind to be motzi you, and you have in mind to be yotzi with his bracha, then that is sufficient. And you can answer amen, and you have been yotzi.
Because I hear a lot of people sometimes, I'm not saying it with circles, but sometimes I hear after someone have a Kiddush or even Hamotzi that they make their own individual bracha.
If they want to make their own individual bracha, they can. If they have lechem mishnah.
I thought that they weren't. I thought they weren't. No, I'm saying they don't have their own lechem mishnah. They're being technically yotze with the person that's making it. Still, they go ahead and make hamotzi or boret b'yagef, even though they're being yotze with that kiddush or hamotzi.
You raised 2 important points. Most people will have wine in front of them when Kiddush is made. So if they don't want, so they answer amen to the Borei Pri Hagafen of the person who's making Kiddush, they can drink that wine. If they want to make their own Borei Pri Hagafen, I think it might be a bracha she'ena tzricha because they've answered amen to the person who's making Kiddush. If they didn't answer amen, that's a separate problem. But if they're answering amen to the person who's making Kiddush, you don't make another Borei Pri Hagafen. And the same thing is true with Hamotzi. If he is being motzi you with his lechem mishnah and he's tearing off a piece to give to you, you don't make a second hamotzi if you answered amen to his bracha. And if you didn't answer amen to his bracha, and you don't have a lechem mishnah in front of you, just have a single roll, then that's problematic. So if a person is making kiddush and he's making it over lechem mishnah and he's making it over a cup of wine, you answer amen to his bracha, and then you can eat the bread and then you can drink the wine. It isn't necessary, and it may be inappropriate to make your own bracha.
Dr. Greene, also, if a person makes kiddush on their little schnapps glass full of grape juice or full of wine, as is the custom many places, then you're not yotze the kiddush because the kiddush has to be a revius. So you have to answer amen to someone drinking a revius, and you have to participate in that revius from that bracha, or your own revius if you make your own bracha.
Okay, so you're raising a number of different questions. The first question is that the person who makes kiddush has to have a revius. That's true. On Shabbos morning, we spoke about this, I think, last year, whether or not you're allowed to make kiddush over a glass of schnapps, being that it's less than a revius. Now, those who are makpid, like for example, in our shul, when Rabbi Yudin used to make kiddush, I think Rabbi Marcus does the same thing. He'll have a revius of schnapps. And then everybody gets a bit of it. I remember I had a chavrusa, and he invited me to his house for lunch, and he asked me, "Do you make kiddush over wine or schnapps?" So I said schnapps. So he gave me a kiddush cup full of schnapps because you got to make kiddush over revius. But there are many poskim who hold. The classic tshuva is from Sholem Shachna, the Rebbe of the Ramah, who sets out the halacha that because wine is, schnapps rather, is much stronger than wine, that a schnapps glass would suffice. So you don't necessarily require a revius. But again, those who are makpid will make kiddush over a revius of schnapps, which is a 3.5 to 4 ounces. Which is a lot to drink at one time, so you share it with your friends. But that's a very important point. They can make kiddush over wine. It has to be a revius, and that's why you answer amen to someone else's bracha, and you yotze. If you're making kiddush over schnapps, you can use a smaller schnapps glass only because schnapps is so much stronger than wine. But those who are very strict will make it over a revius of schnapps and share it with their friends. Good point. Anything else?
Hi, another point. I'm not sure if you said this or not. I might have missed it, but wouldn't you strongly recommend that if you are making kiddush from the bima, we should at least leave the doors open?
For sure. Yes, the door should be open so everybody in the room can hear kiddush. But again, there is a separate halacha. You're not allowed to eat or drink in shul. Period. Makam tefillah. So you really shouldn't be making kiddush from the bima. Everybody should, and many shuls do this, by the way. I've been in many shuls where after davening, everybody stands. They don't grab. They stand by the kiddush table and they wait for the rabbi to come in and make kiddush at the kiddush table. That's a wonderful minhag. I strongly endorse it. I wish we would do it here because it's very problematic. Now we do it for a practical reason, because people, unfortunately, in Shabbat Torah don't have patience to wait, and they chop. But the proper way to do it is for everybody to wait for the rabbi to come into the kiddush room and make kiddush, and everybody hears it in that room, because you're not allowed to eat or drink in the shul itself. So this might be something for our ritual committee, if there ever was one or will be one, to take up in their discussions.
Wally?
Yeah.
They do open the doors before the rabbi finishes the bracha to make it one room.
Again, that allows everybody to hear the Kiddush, but theoretically, the Kiddush should be said in the room where the food is. That would be the preferred way of doing it. I am not posking for Shomrei Torah. That's what you have a rabbi for, but you may want to suggest to the rabbi that they think about this issue on several different levels. It's an important issue. And it's also an issue of derech eretz. People can wait 3 minutes until the rabbi makes his way in. And nobody is so starving that they have to grab. I mean, I know it's that patience is not something that people have in great abundancy, but it would be a nice thing to see if everybody would wait at the table until the rabbi came into that room and made Kiddush there. That would be a more, in my opinion, a more appropriate way to do it. And many shuls do that. Anything else? Okay, enjoy your Kiddush tonight and tomorrow. Have a wonderful Shabbos.
Oh, man. Good Shabbos.